Welcome to Firefighting Today, the weekly Roundtable show. We meet each Sunday evening at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We discuss all sorts of fire service topics. Tonight we've got a couple of special presenters. We've got members of the usual panel, and we've got a couple of special guests with us tonight. We're going to be talking about community risk reduction. More specifically, what does community risk reduction have to do with firefighters? What's the tie here? So that's what we're talking about tonight. We'll introduce the panel in just a minute. We do always say that if you are watching us on YouTube, if you are watching us live on YouTube, leave a comment, a YouTube comment. You can interact with the panel. We will bring your comment right into the discussion. And if you are live on Twitter, you can use the hashtag FFT, as in Firefighting Today, Community Risk Reduction. So FFTCRR is the hashtag if you're watching us live on YouTube. So, with that, I am Peter Lamb. I'm the author of PeteLamb.com. I am also the host of the Firefighter Training Podcast. Warren, say hello. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Warren Whitley, retired Assistant Chief from Prince William County, Virginia.
All right, excellent. Rob.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Rob Flynn. I'm First Assistant Chief with the Dix Hills Fire Department on Long Island, also the President and founder of Face Peace On.
Okay. Joe Starnes.
Good evening, Chief. This is Joe Starnes. I'm with Oak Grove Volunteer Fire Department, Kings Mountain, North Carolina. I'm also one of the co-managers for Project Kill the Flash On.
Thanks for being here, Joe. I appreciate it. Greg, say hello.
Good evening, everybody. Greg Howard. I'm the Deputy Fire Chief for the Dashwood Fire Department from Vancouver Island in Western Canada.
Thank you, Greg. One of our speakers for this evening, Frank, say hello.
Frank Blackley, Wilmington, North Carolina Fire Department, over Administrative Services.
All right. Ethan.
Hi, Pete. Ethan Banstek from Lorraine, Ohio, student of the trade and founder of Pass It On Fire Training.
Excellent, excellent. And our second guest for this evening, Ed, say hello, a little background for the folks watching.
Sure. Excuse me. I'm Ed Comeau with a cold. Sorry about that. I'm with the Vision 2020. It's a project for the Institution of Fire Engineers, and I'm their communications director, but I've also been pretty actively involved in a bunch of community risk reduction projects.
Okay, excellent. And last but certainly not least, Adam.
Good evening, Adam Ganaway, coming from Kellogg, Iowa, volunteer with the Kellogg Fire Department, captain.
Excellent. Thanks for being here. So we've got a pretty diverse panel. We represent a lot of fire departments. We've got a lot of folks, a lot of varied experience here. So really, I'm just going to toss it over. I'm going to just more be a facilitator for this evening. I'm going to toss it over to Deputy Chief Blackley. Frank, tell us really what is community risk reduction? What is it about? What does it mean? And as we go through the presentation, if you have questions, if you're watching, or if members of the panel have questions, let's feel free to ask those. So Frank, where do we start with this?
Well, I guess I really kind of got involved with it about 7 years ago. There's a group called Vision 2020, for those people that are not familiar with it, was formed, and I guess it's kind of the lead project manager is Jim Crawford. And Jim is the former fire marshal in Vancouver, Washington, and also Portland, Oregon. And they basically it started with a fire prevention grant, and they held a national conference in Washington, D.C., and I believe it was 2008. And part of that was I was involved because of being president of the North Carolina Fire Marshals Association. We held part of one group of about 13 throughout the rest of the nation that were actually involved with this to try to come up with some ideas as to what could we do to prevent fire loss. And so we met, and I became involved in one of the three strategies, which is dealing with the fire service culture and how do we change that to focus more on prevention efforts along with everything else that we're doing in operations. During that time, I got moved into operations, and so I was able to become a little bit more involved with both of it. Is how do we focus on doing the prevention stuff that we do day to day? If you think about it, when we do a tour, when we do a fire extinguisher class, whatever it may be, when we see a kid at the grocery store, we have an opportunity to provide public education. And what is the best way to prevent, what's the best thing that we can do to prevent firefighter injuries than to prevent the fire from starting to begin with? We're always going to have fires, and I hear the comment that we're going to put ourselves out of business. There are plenty of people out there that do things that they shouldn't do, so I don't think that is really too much of an issue, unfortunately. So basically what Vision 2020 did was not only looking at the culture of fire service, but looking at prevention advocacy, more prevention marketing. What can we do on the technology side to improve fire safety, whether it's with stovetop type of equipment to reduce the risk of kitchen fires, which is typically the biggest type of fire that we have nationwide. And then, of course, on the code side of it, what can we do from a code standpoint to improve fire safety? And some of those stuff really became more of enlightenment after the Station nightclub fire. What could have prevented that? Obviously, code enforcement. If they got permits for what they were going to do, that way the inspector could have been in there to figure out, well, looking at the combustible finishes, that wouldn't have been a good idea. So that's just kind of a synopsis of kind of where Vision 2020 started and kind of where it is now. And they're still leading the way with lots of different parts of those different categories that I just discussed. So one of the things, too, is that I guess from a firefighter standpoint is that, and I just actually taught a class a couple of weeks ago to 3 of our stations, and the biggest thing that really came out of it from my takeaway was that, you got to have somebody that's got that's a big advocate for community risk reduction in your department to really make it work like it's supposed to. And it's not just dealing with putting up smoke alarms. We're looking at also, what are some issues in your first-in response area that you could address. And as we go through, I can probably give some examples of what we've done here in Wilmington. And I think a lot of those are just, this is kind of a basic of it. I think a lot of it leads back to firefighter safety, and that's what I really try and stress here in Wilmington.
Okay, perfect. Ed, what would you like to add to that? Would you like to add something to do that? Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. One of the things I'd like to mention, too, we were supposed to have one other person on the call, and of course, during the dry run, it worked excellent. Now we can't get in. It's Corey Lewis. He's a firefighter with the Richmond, Kentucky Fire Department. He's also their PIO, and he and I have been pretty actively involved with doing some community risk reduction projects through the Michael H. Minger Foundation. It really focuses on campus fire safety. What we're doing is getting college students working with the fire departments and doing a lot of this outreach programs that Frank was just alluding to, trying to teach them fire safety by having them do fire safety. So, like I said, unfortunately, Corey can't join us. He is online. He's going to be texting me with any comments or questions or suggestions, or just to berate me as firefighters do with what we're saying here. So I just didn't want to point out Corey. For those of you that may not be familiar with us, Vision 2020 started in about 2008, 2007, and we're a project of the Institution of Fire Engineers, and we've received a number of PHS fire prevention and safety grants over the years. The real beginning in 2008 was when we held a huge meeting down in D.C. It was preceded by a number of web forums and such to try to identify gaps in fire prevention. And the idea was, what gaps do we need to fill? What gaps do we need to close in? It just is not being done. And we did come up with 5 strategies. Well, not we, everybody. A huge group. We had over 700 people participating either virtually or in the in-person meeting in D.C. We developed 5 different strategies. Excuse me, I'm sorry. That we're looking at prevention advocacy, prevention marketing, prevention culture, prevention technology, and prevention codes. And the CRR that Frank was just talking about falls into the 3rd strategy, is the prevention culture. It's really a case of trying to change the culture of the fire service when it comes to prevention. I mean, let's be very honest, it's just not one of the things that's really in the forefront of a lot of firefighters' minds. I bet you haven't talked to a firefighter who said he came on the job to do fire prevention. which really wasn't the case. He or she came on the job to put out fires. That's how we all got started in this thing. We wanted to pull hose and we wanted to fight fire. And we still do to this day. But, fire prevention is such a critical part of every fire. And really, when it comes to firefighter safety, as we all know, there's no better way to increase firefighter safety than not having the fire in the first place. And, it's just, especially this time of year, we just see these sad stories time and time again of the fires happening, multiple fatality fires happening. We just had one in Ohio, I believe it was, where 2 were killed. We see these so often during the winter months. 3 people, 4 people, 5 people killed. And it's so easy to say, if they'd only had a smoke alarm. Or, if they'd only known how to use the heating and space heater correctly. Or if they'd only known, those all the smoking materials, not to smoke at the couch on the front porch, all those sort of things. And Corey's here. Hey, Corey. I see his icon popping up there. Okay.
Yeah, it may take him a minute to get on board, so continue.
And it's so easy to say those things, but really, let's look at the root cause. What can we do to effectively change those things? And it's a big focus on it is putting in smoke alarms. But like Frank just said, it's a lot more than just smoke alarms. There's a lot more to community risk reduction. But those smoke alarms are unquestionably our foot in the door. That's how we get in there, and that's how we can start addressing some of these other areas. We have a number of cases we'd like to talk about here tonight. I think I'd like to throw it back to you, Frank, and maybe you can talk about the 5 E's. And really, since you're on the front line, maybe more directly about, and Corey can probably talk about this too, how does it impact firefighters' safety? How does this make a difference for them?
All right, Frank, you want to take it from there?
Yeah, I'll kind of go back and, Ed mentioned the 5 E's. We've always talked about the enforcement, education, and engineering part of fire prevention. But there's really another 2 parts that it's not only that Vision 2020 is talking about, but even the National Fire Academy and their courses, that's kind of what they're focusing on too, and that's the economic incentive, which could be as simple as giving away smoke alarms. It could be something when somebody's developing a new subdivision, maybe you space your hydrants further apart if they put in residential sprinklers. Don't like the word trade-off, but that's kind of what it is. It's basically letting the developers maybe reduce some costs on one end where they can do residential sprinklers on another. And then, of course, the last one is of the 5 E's is emergency response. And, I think that's the part that we're really trying to focus on. When I taught that class, and I was trying to tell our staff that, if you think about it, like community risk reduction, it could be something as simple as, for instance, planning. I visited one of the stations after the class, and we were talking about some things that they could do in their area. And one of them was as simple as addressing, because this station's is primarily residential. They're on the border of the Intracoastal Waterway, and you've got up to 500 to 1,000 foot driveways. And where do you lay your line? Where's the address? The address may not be located appropriately where you can see it. So to me, those are just as much of a community risk reduction effort as it is putting in smoke alarms. And that's what we're really trying to explain, is it's got a whole lot to do with many other things than just the smoke alarm part of it, or giving a tour. What can you do in that first in response area? And it's constantly changing. You can modify it, you can change it, and a part of it's got to do with, if you find something, can you evaluate it? And part of that evaluation may not be in 6 months. It may be 3 or 4 years down the road. It really depends on what you're looking for. But I think, thinking about those 5 E's, and you could also think about it from anytime you go on a call, could you use one of those 5 E's to have prevented it or mitigated it to even happen or before it ever happened? So that's one of the things that we went through, and we actually been teaching a 1-day course for Vision 2020. One of the things that they talk in there is that there's a bunch of different scenarios of actual incidents, whether it's a firefighter injury or death or multiple fatality fire. What could have prevented that, mitigated it from happening? And using those 5 E's, well, what could you have done? It could have been an education, component that you could have done in the community was an engineering, with sprinklers have helped. And one of the examples we talk about is the MGM Grand Fire in Vegas in 1980, where you had, I think it was close to 90 fatalities, and they didn't sprinkle the building to begin with, which was about a $200,000 cost. But what ended up happening was they had almost a $200 million loss between civil suits and repairing the damage. So just looking at those things from any type of incident, really, I think it helped them realize, there are lots of things that we can do out there. There's also a brand new 6-day National Fire Academy course specifically for company officers. And it's talking about how you can develop that station plan at a local level. And what we're really trying to focus on, really in Wilmington also, is that first in area. I mean, those company officers know where the problems are, and they're the ones that can really develop a plan to address those issues, whatever it may be. Instead of me going out there and telling them what they need to do, they're developing those plans. And also it provides a huge component that I like is the ownership. They're actually owning the plan. It's not something I'm telling them they got to do for that. So I've talked a lot here. Next.
Okay. Frank, just before I hand it back to Ed, and we'll try to get Corey in the conversation. Ed, just before I go back to you, I'll try to get Corey in on the conversation. But Frank, very slowly, just repeat the 5 E's for the people that are listening. What are the 5 E's that we're referencing?
Well, of course, the ones that we always talk about, the first 3 is engineering, enforcement, and engineering. I think that's it, yep. And then, of course, the other 2 that are focused on now is the economic incentive portion, and then, of course, the one that I think is extremely important is the emergency response issue. Getting out in your first in area to look out where the problems are actually occurring. Right.
And there was a good comment, actually, while we were having that discussion, and that is, your EMS people might be able to help you because they're in and out of places all of the time. So your EMS folks might be able to help you gather data, if you will. Detectors, no detectors, all those sorts of things can come into play. Corey, are you with us? Can you say a couple of words just to take us here?
Yeah, he said he's on a different computer, but he wasn't sure if he had audio, he could speak or not.
All right, just try it one more time. I saw you unmuted, Corey. Try it again. No, okay, so you're unable. Okay, Ed, anything you'd like to add from where Frank just went? And if not, I'll open questions to the panel.
Well, I mean, it's I've done a number of we're going to talk about some case studies here a little bit about some of the things we've done out there in the field. I know Frank has done a number of them. I've been involved with different ones across the country. Through Vision 2020 and the Mingo Foundation. And we really have some great lessons learned that came out of it. I think the biggest part we found is first of all, you get opposition from the firefighters doing it. In some departments more than others. But what we've historically found is that once they do it, they realize the value of it. They realize how much the people love them doing it for them. They get such positive feedback that, a lot of times I find if you get the firefighters out the door and doing it, they get over that initial hurdle, and it's just something that they understand, yeah, it's part of our job. And really, from an economic point of view, too, I mean, it shows that you're actively involved with the community. So when it comes time to budget, when it's budget time, people remember, oh, yeah, I remember them coming out here. I remember them doing this for me. I remember them coming to my home. They're not just waiting. The only interaction people have with them isn't when something bad is happening. They're having positive interactions, so again, you get that community support, when it comes to budget time and things like that. We did one close to me here in Amherst, Massachusetts, where they used it as a mechanism to build some bridges with the Cambodian population. They had a large influx of Cambodians in Amherst a number of years ago. And they were having some problems with it when the police were having problems with the Cambodian population, and they wanted to build a relationship with them. So we partnered up with the fire department and the Board of Health of all places, because the Board of Health actually had a Cambodian liaison. So this one worked with us in terms of scheduling the visits, going out there, very positive sort of situation. And it's great having her along, and partnerships is really key to all this sort of stuff too. Having a partnership along other than the fire department can help you immensely in terms of getting your foot in the door. And here was a classic example. This woman in the health department was absolutely great in terms of scheduling going in. If there's a language issue, she was able to help us overcome that. We just did a couple of them out on the Navajo Nation and the Tohono O'odham Reservation in Arizona, where unquestionably, if we had not had a local contact helping us with those, we just would not have had the entree into the homes that we needed to have. You know, they're great at scheduling these things, making them happen, getting us in the door. Again, if there are language issues, they were able to help us with those as well. So partnerships are really key. And we're seeing the Red Cross is getting out there big time, starting to do home fire safety visits and community risk reduction. And so that's a great organization to partner with, as is Meals on Wheels, visiting nurses. And Siri was just one that Frank brought up. You want to talk about them a little bit? What Siri's been doing down there in Tucson, Frank?
Yeah, one of the things that this to me is really, really important with dealing with risk reduction is is partnerships, because as you know, we all can't do it ourselves, and they actually developed that partnership in Tucson, a group called Siri, and it was a group that worked a lot with the Hispanic community, and they had a couple issues there. One was the union contract that they had, I think, proposed some issues going out and actually doing the smoke alarm installation, so they worked with Siri. But the reason they could do that too is because obviously I may not want to go there, or they may not be very, very receptive to me, number one, because I'm in a uniform, and number two, because I'm a male. And that type of community, you've got to worry about what are the cultural issues that you're going to be dealing with. So that was just some of the things that they, and it actually worked very well with them being able to put up. I'm not quite sure how many smoke alarms they did during that grant, but it was quite a few.
Okay. Let's just take a pause for a second. Members of the panel, comments or questions before we go too far? Let's get some of the panel members in. Warren, did you have any success with programs of this type down in Prince William?
We did. We were looking a lot at the injury reduction with the elderly, things like that. Also interacting with the Hispanic community, which we had gained a large influx of Hispanic population. Getting with them on especially smoke detectors and basic fire safety. And we worked a lot with the builders in the area to try and get residential sprinklers as either part of a trade-off or just kind of give them the information and the marketability to see if they would install them, and we had pretty good success with that.
Excellent, excellent stuff. Rob, are you doing anything? What are you doing beyond the norm for fire prevention activities so that Frank and Ed get a sense of it?
One of the things I started 3 or 4 years ago was a program we call Until Help Arrives, where we teach the community primarily at our open house some basic, close the door if your room's on fire, how to use a fire extinguisher for a small fire. And basically the biggest impact we saw was what we taught people as far as basic first aid. For a medical emergency, after you dial 911, at 5 or 6 minutes till one of us gets there, what can you do to help the situation along? Help yourself before we get there. It's been a very successful program.
Excellent, excellent. Joe, you had something from the operations side about, marking of dangerous buildings and so forth. Do you want to throw that out?
Well, I was asking the panel, New York City has a software program that will mark buildings, no entry for the firefighters, etc. The other thing I was going to add was one of the things we started here in Cleveland County, we have scheduled continuing ed with the sheriff deputies for the first 15 minutes of an emergency, where they're the first ones on the scene, and so they're getting a little bit of fire behavior training and a little bit of favorably influencing the situation happening also.
Yeah, good stuff. Again, we're hearing about partnering with organizations. Greg, what goes on north of the border? Can you share some stuff there?
We're pretty rural, but there's a provincial program that's called Firefighting for stuffing the property for protect against increase fires. So it covers moving trees away from the immediate area around the house, not stacking firewood by the house.
All right, Greg, you better check. Can you check your audio, Greg? Your audio was pretty washed out there. Can you just try that one more time?
Sure. Can you hear me now, please?
Yeah, it is a little bit of an echo, but it's pretty tough. So go ahead, give it a shot.
I'll give it a try. So there's a provincial program in British Columbia called Firefighting, and it's primarily for protecting against community fires in rural areas. So we present that program as a program by the province, prepare us for most of the serious fires that we can, and then one of the higher risk areas in the province for that.
Okay, that was difficult, but I think we got something. You've got a couple. Okay, somebody's got a couple of things. So Ed or Frank, are there a couple of case histories that you want to talk about?
Yeah, one that Corey brought up there in the chat was we had a couple of years ago now, I guess. Kentucky had a run of fatal fires, multiple fatality fires in a very short period of time. And so working with the Kentucky State Fire Marshal's Office, Vision 2020 went around the state and met with about 5 different fire departments. Corey set up kind of a roadshow where we looked at 5 different geographically and organizationally different fire departments and met with them extensively to talk about what are some of the hurdles to fire prevention? What are some of the hurdles to doing CRR in their community? Besides some of the things we talked about in terms of culture and things like that. We really learned a lot about it and published a report on it on Vision 2020 about some of the things. And part of it is always the staffing. That's always a problem, particularly in the small rural fire departments. You just don't have the people to do this sort of task. It may fall to just one person. Other places is an interesting challenge. Fire chief said, I can't go door to door in my community. I just can't do it. And we were kind of puzzled when we said, well, why can't you? He says, I have more drug labs per capita in my district. And so we just don't go door to door. We just don't do that sort of stuff. Okay, certainly understand that. But we did come up with a series of recommendations out of that in terms of things that could work better for implementing CRR and home fire safety visits and fire prevention in rural communities, just by going out and talking to all these different fire departments and the things that we learned by talking to them. I mean, it was a great experience. Corey and I spent a lot of time in the car traveling across the state, learning these things. It was just a great opportunity. What are the challenges? Because it's easier in a large urban department to detail companies to go out there and install smoke alarms, do home safety visits. And one thing I would like to mention too, and we can expand upon this a little later so I don't monopolize it, but is simplify. One of the biggest things that I've seen on the home fire safety visits I've been with is we just love to tell everybody everything they need to know to be fire safe. And we try that into a 30-minute visit. And it just doesn't work. We just overload the people. So kind of my mantra or my recommendation is the first visit to be a smoke alarm visit. Where that's your foot in the door. Everybody needs a smoke alarm. Everybody wants a smoke alarm. You can go in there and that's all you do is you install a smoke alarm. But it's also your opportunity to size up and take a look at what are their risks. And then you can go back on subsequent visits. Now, I know that takes a lot of staff, but that's where partnerships come in. Maybe the partner who goes back is the Red Cross, somebody who's trained, can go back and address the issues like hoarding. Or perhaps they've got space heaters too close to combustibles. Or they're on oxygen and they're smoking. All these other hazards that, instead of trying to address everything all at once, unless it's an imminent hazard, you can really parcel this sort of stuff out so you don't overload them. I mean, I was on one visit where, in addition to putting up a smoke alarm, they were teaching an 85-year-old woman how to use her fire extinguisher. And let's be realistic. I mean, she could barely pick it up. So was that a worthwhile use of everybody's time? And is she even going to remember that? So we did get a whole lot of information out of that thing around Kentucky.
Right, right. Frank, did you have a different example?
There's another example from Merseyside, United Kingdom, and that's basically where Liverpool is for people that don't know, because I'd never heard of it before. But in about 2000, the fire brigade actually went on strike, and during the contract renegotiations, they actually put part of it in there to focus more on prevention efforts. And they, over about a 8 to 10 year period, they were able to decrease their number of fires and specifically fire fatalities by about 50% because they were basically going into homes, doing home inspections, and putting in working smoke alarms. And they did lots of partnerships because it's a very diverse community, and they got all these groups really working with the fire brigade. So that's really a very good example from I guess a global perspective that that we can really kind of transfer here to the U.S. too. But there's a difference there because Merseyside doesn't do really a lot of EMS, where in the U.S. we do, which takes more time and training and responses. So, but that is it's a good example where you really can focus on prevention efforts. You can make a real difference.
Suppose, where do I start? I'm a small suburban fire chief. Where do I start with this concept? I do fire prevention. I have an open house on Fire Prevention Week. I do whatever. So where do you suggest? What is the first thing that people watching us tonight? Where do they start as they're understanding some of these things that we're talking about? Who wants to take that? Either Ed or Frank. Which of you would? What do we do?
Well, that's a real perfect segue to the next thing we really kind of wanted to talk about. Thank you.
You're welcome.
This last week we launched a new set of products, shall we say, for lack of a better word. One is an online guide to home fire safety visits. You can go to www.homefiresafetyvisit.org. Again, that's homefiresafetyvisit.org. You can find an online guide to answer your very question. What do I do? How do I do this? What tools do I need? What resources do I need? It's all right there at homefiresafetyvisit.org. In addition to that, we've also launched a couple of new apps. A new app from those. Oh, and I do have to mention that guide was done by the Washington State Association of Fire Marshals. They were the lead agency on that, and Vision 2020 worked with them. So that came out of WASP out in Washington State. Working with the Friendship Veteran, and I always get it wrong, Friendship Fire Engine Veterans Association out of Virginia. We help them develop an app that you can use when you're going into homes to do home fire safety visits. And that kind of gets back to one of the questions here. I think somebody mentioned in the thing there about analytics. One of the things we developed through Vision 2020 is a mechanism for documenting these visits and gathering information when you're doing it. When we first started doing it back in 2008, it's a paper form. You go back to the station and enter it online and into an Excel spreadsheet and then send the spreadsheet off. In 2010, when we were doing those visits with the Cambodian population in Amherst, what I did was I got a couple of iPads, and at first I was just using them for the documentation purposes. I created an online Google form where they could enter the information in there, and one of the guys came with the idea, said, can we show fire safety videos at the same time while we're in the homes? And I said, what a great idea, because we can talk about putting water on a grease fire, and everybody nods and understands. Well, you can show them a 30-second video, and boom, there you go. So one of the things we developed, so we do have the online form for documenting these visits, and information about that is in that guide that I had mentioned at homefiresafetyvisit.org. But the app that you can download from both the Apple App Store and Google Play is an app that has 4 fire safety videos in there, and it also has it in different languages. It has English, Chinese, Spanish, and American Sign Language. So when you go into the home, if you have, excuse me, I'm sorry. If you want to show something on cooking, for example, you can bring up this video, very short video. And also the important thing is it's resident on the iPad or on the tablet. It doesn't have to be an iPad. It can be any device. It can be your mobile phone. It can be a tablet. So you don't have to worry about an internet connection. And you can show them some of these things. So to answer your question, Pete, homefiresafetyvisit.org, online guide to how to do CRR. And there's also links there to the apps that we've developed out of Friendship and organization strategy. I can never roll it off my tongue here. But are two great tools that we just came out with last week.
Okay, and for the folks that are watching, if you go to the Google Plus events page, or if you go to Google Plus where you saw this events page, those links, all of the links to stuff that Ed has just talked about are there and available. We've made them all clickable links. For the members of the panel, we've also tossed that in the chat room as well, so you can have that. So where do we go next? Other case histories? I would just tell you from personal experience, I had two. I would say the two payoffs for me were the Visiting Nurse Association, just because of my demographics. We worked very closely with the Visiting Nurse Association and the Department of Health. Those, because our local Board of Health was responsible, they interfaced with the senior citizens and Meals on Wheels and so forth. So our biggest take back, we had very little success with home inspections. We had a very difficult time with home inspections. It just, I don't know if it was the demographics or what it was, but just not well received by the public. And we had done a fair amount of education with that. But I couldn't agree more on the stressing with the Board of Health and the visiting nurses. Those are tremendous resources that I can speak to as a personal experience. So good stuff. Go ahead, Ed.
Yeah, something along that line. When Corey and I were doing our roadshow in Kentucky, one of the fire departments, we asked them, we said, okay, what are your problem areas? Where are you running a lot? And they had a lot of migrant Hispanic workers down there doing their crops, and so they had a real problem with the number of fires down there. And I said, well, do you work with them? And they said, no, they have no relationship with them whatsoever. I said, well, who does? I said, the Catholic Church. So it's really key to look at, who is a key person to partner with to give you that foot in the door, to give you that entree that you may need. Visiting nurses are great because they're in the homes all the time. So really, Corey had mentioned here, risk assessment is the key to being successful. So it's really identifying in the community where your risk lies. And you know how it is. You ask the firefighters where they run into all the time, and they can tell you in a heartbeat. This is where we're running all the time. It's like, okay, and what can we do to fix that?
Right, and I think Warren brought that up also. I mean, your first due response area is where you start, and I think, Frank, you've mentioned that as well. That is the place to start because they know the issue, and if your department does run EMS, those paramedics are in and out of more buildings all the time, so that's again a great resource. Any questions or comments from the panel before we go into another area? Anything from the panel? Good? Everybody good? All right. Go ahead, Frank. Where do you take us next?
When I taught that class in Wilmington a few weeks ago, just some of the takeaways I had from it. And one of them I think I kind of already mentioned is that you really got to have a true advocate within your department that's promoting CRR, and that's including the whole aspect of it for people to buy in. Because if they see that you're just doing it because you have to do it, not because you want to, firefighters are very intuitive. They can see right through it, and that's one of the comments I got. And it was interesting when I got them in there, one of the shifts, that I asked them, said, "How many of y'all are so excited about being here?" And of course, it was like, "Ha ha ha, yeah, right." Basically, the time we got to the end of the class, it was like, "Well, now that we really truly understand what you're talking about, it makes sense." And when as we're going through a lot of it, they're really doing it already. They're just not calling it CRR. whether it's pre-incident planning and all those other different aspects. We're really doing a lot of it ourselves, but this is a little bit more structured, and it kind of focuses them on doing something specific, not something that's just halfway. One of the things is too that that when they're developing a plan, one of the things that we talk about in that class is developing demographics in your area. What type of incidents are you responding to? What can your firefighters do? You got some people that may be good on the technology side, other people that may be able to talk in public better than others. Everybody's not cut out for that, so that's what you're really trying to figure out. Looking at what are your goals? What is your goal? What is the problem that you're trying to address? And what are your strategies to meet that goal or the objectives? So and basically trying to write that stuff down, because they need to really be able to look at it, evaluate it, and modify. And I'll give you a good example from one of our stations, Station 4, B shift, and they were looking at trying to do something over at UNC Wilmington, because we were running lots of fire alarm activations in the dorms in apartments. And they said, well, the issue we're having is they're having issues in the kitchen. And one of the things that we want to do is what can we do to prevent those calls from occurring? So they got thinking, well, maybe we can work with Williams-Sonoma. When you think about Williams-Sonoma, that's probably not really the demographic that most college students are going to be dealing with. We thought about maybe one of the local grocery stores that was close by that they could work with, on kitchen safety. Well, none of that panned out, and they found well, what about the actual cooking staff at UNC Wilmington? And it's Aramark, and they're all over the country. So they ended up working with some of the chefs, and they actually created a couple of videos, one on cooking fire safety and another one on just fire safety in general. And they turned out really well, and I wish I could post a link so you could go out and see them, but just all you got to do is just Google UNCW or UNC Wilmington fire safety videos, and you'll be able to see them, and they're made with the college students and our firefighters, and it really turned out very well to try and look at, what can they do to reduce those type of incidents. And it's going to take a little bit of time to figure that out, but they also show those videos now when new students move in. So we developed that partnership with UNC Wilmington, and it's really helped out tremendously.
Excellent. I guess I have a question. Who are the leaders in this right now? You've mentioned a couple of folks. Frank, you're actively working. Who could stand out as our role models right now for good examples of CRR? Anybody? Ed or Frank?
Well, the first one that really pops to mind is Philadelphia. Philadelphia's been very, very aggressive on getting out there, installing from the homes, doing home fire safety visits. As a matter of fact, Corey and I just did a session down there, again, as part of the Mingo Foundation. And instead of college students, what they did is we did it with their Explorer program, high school kids. And they came in for a short training program we developed. It's an hour long, just real basic fire safety, fire prevention. And that actually brings up another point, too. Some of the fire departments we've been working with, we wound up teaching the firefighters as much as we did wind up teaching the students about fire safety. We kind of went in with the assumption that the firefighters knew a base level of what we were talking about, and as it turned out, that wasn't always the case. So some of the places we went into, we were bringing the firefighters up to speed on fire prevention. But in Philadelphia, we had a class of, what was that, Corey, about 30, I think, cadets and explorers that came in. The commissioner was there for the whole time, Derek Sawyer, the new commissioner down there in Philly. He spent the whole day with us, and we went through the training session, then we went out into the field, went door to door installing smoke alarms. It was definitely a first for them. And Commissioner Sawyer's idea was get them while they're young. Try to get that mindset of fire prevention in them. Now, unfortunately, tragically, Philly just had a fatal fire, which I'm sure you heard about. Firefighter was killed in a basement fire, which reinforces even more the importance of this whole thing of making sure that you avoid these fires from happening in the first place, because it really does play into firefighter safety, as Frank was talking about earlier. But Philly is really one of the ones I see as coming to the top. They've installed tens of thousands of smoke alarms over the years. And they still have the fires, unfortunately. They're a large urban city. So is something you do have to stay on top of on a regular basis.
Okay, great information, and yes, obviously this panel would be remiss if we didn't acknowledge that line of duty death. As we tape here in December 14, that was about 5 days ago on December 9th, so tragic loss of a firefighter life there. So we certainly always try to mention those when they occur within the week that we are having a session. Anybody from the panel, any questions for Frank or Ed, or comments from the panel? Anybody? Okay, Frank, as we go, we've got about 10 minutes left. What's the call to action to our listeners? What is it that you and Ed, what is our call to action? So, hey, listen, I watched this show. There was a bunch of people on a panel, and they were talking about stuff. And so what do we do about it? What is it you want to have happen after folks have looked at this program? I'll start with you, Frank.
I just think I want people to understand that number one, because the big concern I got, and it was one of the things that came out of the classes, that I had one of the company officers say, well, am I going to lose my job? And I'm thinking, no, that's not going to happen. I think it's really, it's upon ourselves to really focus on what can we do to help the community. And if you're just out there to run the red lights and sirens and go put out a fire, then I think you're in the wrong business. And that's kind of strong language, but I think that's what we really have to focus on. And when we go to a house fire, think about all the problems that they're running into, all the possessions they've lost, something they may have collected their entire lives, old photos, all of that stuff is gone. And seeing how that's affecting our lives and or their lives. But a recent friend of ours, they just had a fire in their home, and they're going to be out of it for several months, and all the pain and anguish that they've had to go through for that. But I think one of the things too is that our firefighters are smarter than we think, and I think sometimes when we really kind of explain what CRR is and why it's important, they like I said, they're not stupid, and they can figure it out and say, oh yeah, we're doing this already. We just may need to focus our efforts on something specific than just this kind of broad range of topics that sometimes we get into. But I think things are beginning to change. In our recruit class, I'm going to teach that this coming week, is the fire prevention class. We're putting that towards the front, not towards the end, where it is in the manuals. There was a thing here. On all the fire magazines, we see the big fire pictures. I'm not even going to go there, but what can we do to really kind of, focus more on the prevention efforts?
Right, absolutely. And there's a good comment from Corey there about engaging the leaders. I think that's important. I'm going to try to, let me see if I can bring that up, because it's worthwhile. Corey's comment is, we must engage those leaders to create and support risk reduction initiatives within our ranks at the fire department. When residents and decision makers understand existing potential risks, they're better prepared to be a partner. And I would just say to you that that's a tough pill for the fire service, Corey. I couldn't agree more with what you said. I think you're right on. But it is a tough pill when we begin to talk about our limitations. Firefighters and chief officers and everyone, they think they're going to lose funding. It really is. I've noticed when I have those discussions with people, they get very nervous about that, very territorial. But I think your comment is right on, Corey. Thank you for that. So, Ed, what do you want people that have watched the show or listened? What do you want them to do? What's your call to action as we begin to summarize here?
Well, one of the things I'd like to kind of just build on what you just said. In my mind, community risk reduction is the equivalent of community policing, what the cops are doing it. And yeah, they're out there doing community policing, but they're not running out of jobs. And so I think it's probably the fire service's equivalent of that, of getting out there in the community and building that support, so they don't just think you're sitting behind the doors just waiting for them to roll up. You're actually doing something on a very regular basis. Again, I'd encourage everybody to go to homefiresafetyvisit.org, where you find that online guide. There's a lot of resources and tools in there, and that's an evolving document. So if there's more that you need, or you have suggestions or ideas, please hit the contact us link on that page and let us know. If you need some help, let us know. We're glad to work with you. We've got a lot of experience. We've got contacts like Frank and like Corey, and I'm really sorry Corey couldn't take part here. He's been very experienced in this stuff. He's got some great ideas, developed some great training material for us to use out there. So I really encourage you to go to firesafetyvisit.org, and you'll also find the links to iTunes and App Store and Google Play, where you can download those apps from the Friendship Veteran Engine Fire Association out of Virginia. And anything we can do at Vision 2020 to help you out, please let us know. We'll be glad to help you out any way we can.
Perfect. Any questions from the panel or final comments? Anything you want to do just before we close and summarize? We're good? All right. That's good stuff. I think we'll end it there. We do ask you to check with us now and again at firefightingtoday.com. That's where the archives of the show live. All of our past archives are there. If you have an interest in being on the show or a topic you think we need to cover, I think that you should send me an email at pete@peteliam.com, and we could make arrangements to get you on the show and talk about the topic that's of interest to you. So with that, be sure to check back with us. We did mention we are recording on December 14th. I don't know when you will watch this show. You can watch it at some point in the future, but we will look for our schedule. We will post our schedule as we approach the holidays here. We don't know if we'll be back every single week here. We're trying to make sure our friends and family get our attention as well. So with that, we'll see you next week.